All right, Conrad, taking a look now at your essay. This is your rough draft from week 5. So let's get right into it. I'll move myself out of the way there. So as you can see here, I've got your paper here on the left here. Got the the exemplar for MLA over here on the right in case we need to look at that. So let's take a look at what we got here. So first thing I note that you have some little bit of spacing issue here. You want to make sure you this should only be double spaced all the way through, so this is too much here. So just make sure you double space everything, even between parts. Also, don't put this in bold. It should just be regular writing. Um, so, and then the title looks okay. Yeah, your title looks okay, and you get this information up here. Good page numbering. All right, so let's see what you did with your introduction here. So, part 1 is the topic. And let's see, almost everyone feels stressed, but a lot of people don't realize how much it affects their body and mind. So we can tell that I can already tell it's going to be about stress. And then you say people often juggle work, school, family, and personal obligations in today's busy world without taking time to rest or learn good ways to deal with stress. So referring to today's busy world covers the historical context, so that's good. And we'll see about cultural here in a second. Um, Probably, yeah, I think you've got that covered pretty well. So the here you introduce the article, Nicole Pelusi's article, "Take a Break," talks about how stress has become a normal part of modern life and how important it is to understand how it affects us. In it, she talks about how stress affects both mental and physical health and gives practical ways to deal with it, like what this should be such as instead of like, such as working out, setting limits, and asking for help. You use such as when you're listing examples. You use like when you're making a comparison. Okay. So, according to Pelusi, stress is common but can be dealt with. She shows this by clearly describing how. Okay, so I don't know. You maybe not. Maybe you didn't get my information in time to fix it, or for whatever reason you didn't fix your thesis statement. But your thesis statement should be a single sentence, one sentence, no period here like this. It should be a single sentence, and it needs to talk about at least some kind of a negative about the article. You've got to make sure you talk about that negative. Okay, because in order to show that we're good at evaluating our sources, it's like a movie critic. They're going to find the negative and point the negative out as well as the positive, and that's what's expected of you to do a great job here and show that. So this is shown to you by the exemplar. So that's why you have to use the exemplar. If I look over here on the right and make this, I don't know if I can make this any bigger or not. Um, But anyway, if you look here and you bring this exemplar up yourself and take a look at it, you'll see that the thesis statement right here comes right here at the end. It says, in her article, "What Everyone Needs to Know to Be More Productive," Dana Rossmanier addresses these issues by focusing on workers who feel they are competing with AI technologies and each other and want to be more productive in order to be more competitive in the workplace earners. Right? So then it goes on to, I'm sorry, that's not the actual, that's just more information about her article. That's the introduction to the article. So here's the thesis statement. Thesis statement starts with Rosemanier argues, and that shows the genre, right? So that helps to show the genre. The genre, in this case, the genre of your article would be to argue for uh, whether or not her article is good or not, right? So in this case, he says Rose Manier argues for a balance between productivity and downtime, emphasizing the value of productivity and ways to be a productive worker. But although here's the negative, right? But although she emphasizes the importance of work-life balance, she does not offer as many ways to truly take a break and improve personal side. So that's what you're expected to do here too, is talk about something that she maybe doesn't do quite so well, and that's up to you. It's completely up to your opinion as to what that might be, but you got to have some kind of a negative there. Okay. Now, also, this should be double spaced here, so you get the excess spacing issue. Um, you say talks about, she talks about, so it's basically you're showing it as informal, or I mean informational, which is true of her topic, but yours should be more argumentative. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit off of that just to make sure you realize it, that this part one is all about your argument, right? And yours should be more of an argument about her article, the quality of her article, rather than being informational like hers is, right? So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Now, let's take a look at purpose. I think you do have the purpose here. Uh, Stress is common but can be dealt with. Shows this by describing how it affects the body, and so forth. So that's okay. So you've got that. I think the purpose is okay there. You don't really have a clear audience here that you'd mention. You just say people often, right? And then you refer to you here. It shows how breast has become a normal part of modern life. It affects us. So you right at this way. This basically tells me that your audience is like just everybody that's breathing, right? So that's obviously not proper. You need to have a specific audience, and this should be one of the assignments you've already done. You should have chosen what your audience would be for your first audience, and then for when you add this to part 2 and actually create your final project in week 7, you need to make sure you have a second audience for part 2, a different audience. All right, so your audience is not clear here. You have not pointed out a specific audience that you're talking to. All right, historical and cultural context. You've got the historical. I think the cultural would come in better once you have your audience selected, and then you can talk about whose audience that audience. So I'm going to take a little bit out of that because you don't really have a clear cultural context, even though you do allude briefly to the historical context, which is today, right? Core idea, your core idea. You're not really getting across your core idea here in your thesis statement also, because basically, and again, your thesis statement should be talking about how good a job Pelusi's article does. So it's all about how good a job she does. Again, take a look at the exemplar and see here where he says Rose Manier argues for a balance between productivity, right? So even if you just start this by saying Pelusi argues that stress is common but can be dealt with, that would make it more along the lines of you talking about what her article is doing rather than talking about the topic. Okay, so that's what's important, is making it all about the article and Pelusi and how good a job she does at getting her information across, not about the topic itself. Okay, so you have some of these are a little off just because you don't have that part down yet. All right, now the details are where we get into the body paragraphs. Pelusi's article is about stress and how important it is to learn healthy ways to deal with it. She talks about stress as a disease that affects the whole person, not just how they feel. By talking about both the mental and physical effects, she helps people understand that ignoring stress can lead to big problems. This makes the topic seem important and pressing instead of unimportant. The topic is relatable for most readers because they have been stressed, which helps the article work. Now, here's another problem. So you've got some details here, but you don't really have. So I can give you the credit on the details, but you don't have any clear evidence. And your evidence would be quotes from Pelusi's article. You have to include in these body paragraphs some actual quotes from the article. Okay, so that's a big issue that you've got missing here. All this, of course, would be shown to you if you just use the exemplar. That's why I harp on it so much. That exemplar, when you revise all this and you do this for week 7, you've got to use the exemplar. You just have to use it. Notice here it shows you how to do all this stuff, right? It even has in bolds here these notes that tell you here the genre is indicated again. Here it says this final sentence is the thesis statement, blah, blah, blah. So it tells you in bold what they're actually doing in the exemplar. That's why it's so absolutely vital, and you've got to use it. If you don't use it, you're probably not going to end up with a very good grade, at least not one you really were hoping for. So you have just absolutely got to use the exemplars. If you have some kind of a problem with using exemplars, maybe you can't find them, or you don't understand them or something like that, just please reach out, get some help from me but you've got to use those, okay? Now, so you're not really providing evidence. You've only, here you're talking about the genre, so that's something you should have done way up here in the introduction. Mix of facts, and then again you just end the whole paragraph. See, when you have a whole paragraph here, then you just end it with Pelusi's name. It just makes it seem like the whole thing is from Pelusi. You can't do that. You have to make sure that you have Pelusi. You have to have, again, look at the exemplar. Whenever there's a quote, like right up here, it says whatever. Let me make this a little bigger. Maybe I can make it a little easier for you to see. When you look up here, you'll see that when he uses something from the source, he says, he uses a, I got to go down to the body paragraph. He uses a, so here, notice he says that she argues for the balance between productivity. Notice how that connects to the thesis statement up here. And then this is what we call the topic sentence. So that's where you make the point of the first body paragraph. And this tells you all this stuff here. It's indicated in the thesis statement, expanded here to become the sentence, the topic sentence of the paragraph. And then he says 9 of the 13 paragraphs in her essay focus directly on how to be productive. So notice he's making all about article and his evaluation of the article, what he thinks is good about the article and what he thinks is not so good comes later. Here he says the productivity paragraphs offer advice including discovering one's cognitive style so they can, quote, align their work strategies with their cognitive style, getting organized, using productive apps, and taking ownership of it. Notice since these are quotes in here, he ends the line with Rose Manier 3, which is basically he's just telling you the last name of the author and the page number. That's what you should be doing, but only after quotes, not after the entire paragraphs, because that means I can't tell what part comes from Pelusi in here and what doesn't, right? And you basically just do that for every paragraph. That's not what works. That's not what you need to do. So I'm already getting a little further along in here than I wanted to get. So let me just skip down to, so your evidence is kind of, is not very prevalent there at all because you're just basically going through and talking about the different things that it's about. Here you talk about the genre, here you talk about the purpose, here you're talking about the students that are target audience. You're following the exemplar, in other words, or not the exemplar, you're following the rubric in this case, and I see this every semester. You're following the rubric instead of following the exemplar. You've absolutely got to follow the exemplar, okay? So, communication could be more clear, obviously, if you were doing all of this stuff correctly. Your citations and attributions are not very good at all because all you're doing is putting her name at the end of every paragraph, which is completely not what we're looking for. Now, this is what we look for. Where you actually quote her, that's where you should have Pelusi. And also in here, after her name, you should have a page number, just a number, right? And then your conclusion, even your conclusion ends with the Pelusi's name. So that's not how you do it. You have to follow the exemplar, okay? And you may want to look up in the Shapiro library how to cite your information throughout a paper properly in MLA. Your works cited page here looks okay. Not much to it anyway. So that will work, I think, for that one. There is a date though, so you need to fix that. There is the article definitely has a date to it. They all have dates. And it was originally in print, but you may be able to find a URL for the actual one now. So, but I'll let you look at that. Let's see if you can find anything else. One thing you do need to fix is you need to delete the S here because you've only got one item here. So it's work cited. All right, Conrad, that's about it. Really it all boils down to you just got to follow the exemplar. I can't stress that any more than I already have. You've got to follow the exemplar for week 7, or you're going to end up having a grade that's just not what you're hoping for. Like this one is a 71. This could have been an A had you just followed the exemplar. So don't take me. I'm not trying to beat you up. I'm just trying to really push this and drive home the point that you have got to use the exemplar. It's just absolutely vital. Okay, so that will do it for this video. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be glad to help you. I'd help you. We could do a virtual meeting, and I can help you with anything you need. Just please reach out, okay? And that will do it for this video.